So last week, we talked about practicing the virtue of welcoming as a way of embodying respect for the inherent worth and dignity of each person, which is our first principle. By being welcoming, we said first we meant allowing someone into our space, then honestly and openly engaging with them. That is, being present to them, treating them as if they matter, and being open to the possibility that they might touch our life. Now, the poet Rumi says we should apply this same virtue to ourselves, that we should be welcoming to all the different parts of ourselves. This being human is a guest house, he said. Every morning a new arrival, welcome and entertain them all. So, what might that mean? Well, to be welcoming to a part of yourself means, first of all, to allow it to enter your consciousness, just as we allow a visitor to enter our space. And that means we don't deny it or repress it, but just allow that part of ourself in. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to approve of it, we have to take it on wholeheartedly, or that we rush to embody it in our actions. And this is an important point that I want to be clear on, because sometimes there's an idea that by accepting ourselves, that means that we have to like every part of ourselves, or saying that nothing about us needs to change. There's a TV show, Louie, I don't know if you've seen it, but on that TV show, the comedian Louis C.K., he gets stuck watching a child for a day that he doesn't really know, and this child turns out to be horribly unsocialized. And he does a lot of surreally destructive things to the house, and he has a lot of weird, obnoxious behaviors. And at the end of the day, the child's frustrated because nobody wants to be around him. And he doesn't understand why this is happening to him. And he says to Louis, "My mom said everything I do is okay because I love myself." And Louis says, "Your mom's wrong, kid." Because respecting people's inherent worth and dignity, our own or other people's, doesn't mean never judging, right? It doesn't mean I'm okay, you're okay. That everything we do is fine and dandy because we're just that special. Quite the opposite, actually. Part of having dignity is accountability. We recognize that people have free will. We recognize that people can make choices, and so we hold people accountable. And we seek to be held accountable for our own actions and our own choices. But before we attempt to apply judgment or discernment to ourselves, we have to be able to experience ourselves honestly. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Just at the level of fact. At the level of, this is a feeling I'm having. This is a thought that I'm having. This is a desire that I'm having. This is part of me right now. So there are two reasons that I would suggest that it is important and good to apply this practice of being welcoming to ourselves. First, being welcoming to ourselves is conducive to being welcoming to others. If we be honest and objective about who we are, and if we can experience ourselves without being decentered by that experience, if we can get to a place of confidently owning ourselves in all our imperfect, raw, rough-edged glory, then we are less threatened by the rough edges of the people around us. When we're comfortable in our own skin, we encourage other people around us to be comfortable in their own skin, and we can engage one another more honestly and more compassionately. Second, we are the beneficiaries of a great, mysterious gift. This one chance to experience life as the unique person that is ourselves. And we owe it to ourselves to embrace that opportunity fully. Think of all the different things that go into making up just what we are. When we talk about being a self, being a person, think about all that goes into that. First, there's just the material stuff. There's just the physical stuff. So let's take a moment to celebrate the spectacular, random weirdness of the whole embodied human enterprise. We are put at birth in bodies totally not of our own choosing. We had no say in it whatsoever. And our abilities are determined, at least to some extent, by the bodies that we got plopped down into. Particularly by the content of our genes, right? There's a range of possibilities for ourselves that we inherited at birth. And we're given a very short span of time to explore those possibilities. And we're not given a particularly good roadmap for doing so. The satirical news magazine, The Onion, had a story once that we actually shared in church here. Satirical, okay, it's not a legitimate story, but the headline is 97-year-old dies unaware of being a violin prodigy. And the story goes, retired post office branch manager Nancy Hollander, 97, died at her home of natural causes Tuesday after spending her life completely unaware that she was one of the most talented musicians of the past century and possessed the untapped ability to become a world-class violin virtuoso. She is survived by 2 daughters, a son, 6 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren, all of whom will forever remain oblivious to the national treasure Hollander would have become had she just picked up a violin even once. What we think we know about our capabilities and our actual capabilities might be very different. We don't know until we know. And sometimes in life, the challenging is not how to be welcoming to the parts of ourselves that we don't like, but how to be welcoming to the parts of ourselves that we might like too much. The parts that might represent some unexplored creative avenue, some untapped capacity for joy or purpose or meaning. Those untapped avenues can be destabilizing to our lives and to our priorities. Maybe in small ways, maybe in big ways. We think we have our life carved out in stone, and we find out maybe it's actually scratched out on an Etch-a-Sketch. And that unacknowledged part of us is threatening to take it and shake. So here's a side story. I know a woman who was living a comfortable life, working a stable but uninteresting job, and she was happy. And she never went to college. She didn't think of herself as an intellectual. She married a successful small business owner who also didn't go to college, and things were fine. And late in life, she took an introductory class in logic at a community college. Maybe just on a whim. Maybe she was welcoming some part of herself to the table that formerly she had shown out to the door. And she liked that class, so she took another. And then she enrolled in that college, pursuing a degree in philosophy. Now this was threatening to her husband, talking about needing to welcome all of the different parts of herself, because he didn't know where he would fit in all of a sudden in a marriage where she had a college degree and he did not. So he made a lot of small comments, kind of sniping at it, undermining it, teasing a little bit. And she took a risk and she called him to the carpet on it. She said flat out, you need to own your fears, because if you can't support this, I'm moving on without you. I want to be married to you, but if you will not get behind this, I am moving on. Today she has a PhD, and she works in the sphere of international civil rights, particularly for women who are at risk, and they're still happily married. But back to genes. Our genes map out for us not just the range of our physical and mental capabilities, but even the parameters of our personality. This is part of the wonderful weirdness of being us. Think of that a large component of our behavior is genetic. Because life, evolution, doesn't just evolve bits of stuff, parts like wings and thumbs and eyeballs and scorpion tails. Life evolves all of these different strategies for being in the world, for interacting with the world. And we, through no fault of our own, inherit a big random batch of those strategies, which we are then left to apply to the modern world. And this argues not just for some self-acceptance, but I think a healthy dose of humor about this whole situation. So for example, when we find ourselves pounding on a vending machine because we put in our money and we push the button and the Snickers almost came out and then it's teetering and it stops and it's hung up in the spokes and it's not going to drop down and you're banging on it and banging on it. That's evolution at work. Think about evolution behind the scenes, right? Fiddling with all of these behavior dials, all of these different strategies for dealing with that. Choosing different levels of aggression, different levels of persistence of desire, different levels of temper display and threat display, and all on and on in making you up. Think of hundreds of millions of years of evolution trying out all of these different ways of behaving in the world, all to result in a hairless primate banging on a metal box in an empty brain. Some of us get more hairless all the time. But as we said earlier, laughing at our own behavior doesn't mean we don't hold ourselves accountable. We are reasoning creatures with free will. There's nothing supernatural about that. Right? We've evolved the capacity to reason because it makes us awfully successful at getting on in the world. But in the end, it does vastly more than that. Because through reason, we uncover truths that transcend time and space, that transcend biology, that transcend culture. So regardless of our physical urges or our gut-level instincts, those evolved things, and regardless of what the people around us are telling us to do, or regardless of what our culture models for us, we can adopt a transcendent viewpoint about what is the right thing to do. For Unitarians, this is traditionally the locus of human dignity. When you talk about inherent dignity, this is where we put it. Our ability to discern and act upon truth, particularly moral truth. In a sermon entitled Likeness to God, the great Unitarian minister William Ellery Channing wrote, "We approach our Creator by every right exertion of the powers He gives us. Whenever we invigorate the understanding by honestly and resolutely seeking truth, and by withstanding whatever might warp the judgment, whenever we invigorate the conscience by following it in opposition to the passions, whenever we war against a habit or desire which is strengthening itself against our higher principles, be the occasion ever so humble, obscure, or familiar, then the divinity is growing within us. And we are ascending towards our Creator. True religion thus blends itself with common life." Now, where I would disagree with Channing, and I think invoke the spirit of Rumi, is with the idea that we war against our habits and that we war against our bad desires. Our bad habits, our desires, our anger, our passivity, our procrastination, our addictions, our selfishness, whatever it is, these are all a part of us. And waging a war against them can be a path of denial. In effect, saying, I will destroy this thing inside of me because it is not me. And it has no place here. And I would say with Rumi, welcome it in, acknowledge it, and offer that part of yourself rest and healing. Mr. Rogers used to carry a note in his wallet that said, there isn't anyone you couldn't learn to love once you've heard their story. Well, each part of us has a story too. But still, we are accountable. We can accept ourselves, but that's just part one. Part two is doing the work that we need to do. If that means getting help, then we get the help that we need. So we're embodied in our body as physical beings. And we interface with the eternal and the universal through our power of reason. Meanwhile, we're also embedded in the particular, in history. We were raised by this family, in this tribe, in this neighborhood, in this country, at this time of history, right? We're products of the interplay of our genes, our physical potentiality, our reason, and our culture. And culture is an interesting thing because it's created by people, but it is larger than people. It exists independently of people, and it evolves with its own logic, independently maybe of what any of us might want it to do. And so we can be shaped by our culture, shaped in reaction to our culture, in conflict with our culture, proud of our culture, ashamed of our culture, running from our culture, and struggling to remember where we came from all at the same time. Substitute the word family for culture, and the exact same thing still applies. So it's a very complicated relationship that we have to these forces in our life, and finding our space and carving out our unique space can be a challenge. And so our heads can get crowded with the voices of our family and the voices of our neighborhood. And we can live our lives, our adult lives, haunted by the ghosts of all of these voices from our childhood and our past. So here, standard ghost rules apply, and if you've seen The Sixth Sense, you know what I mean. The only way to get a ghost to go away is you have to welcome it in, so it can speak its piece, or otherwise it will never stop haunting you. Okay, embedded in bodies, embedded in culture, embedded in the eternal. And finally, the poet Walt Whitman said, "There is that in me, I do not know what it is, but I know it is in me. It swings on more than the earth I swing on." It swings on more than the earth I swing on. There is an I don't know what it isness about being human, about the human response to life and the universe. We're here in the realm of art, the poetic imagination, of longing, of love, of vision, of Buddha sitting down at the base of the Bodhi tree, of St. Francis stripping off his clothes in his father's court, of Joan of Arc leading her armies to victory, of Gandhi leading his people to the sea. We are embedded in mystery. We're big things. We're huge, messy, complicated, mysterious things, right? With this swirling nexus of evolution, of culture, of reason, of I don't know what it is. And then we sum it all up and we say, hey, I'm Fred and I'm an accountant. So we take this big thing and we tell small stories about it. And then sometimes, maybe, I don't know if it's some perverse pride of authorship, but we get attached to the small stories that we tell about ourselves. We get committed to that story. We insist that you tell the same story that I'm telling, and sometimes we'll do anything to protect that small story about who we are. But we are larger than what we know. And I'm telling you right now, the world needs everyone in it to be larger than what they know. 3 simple suggestions for the wear and care of this big, messy self that we all inherited, that you were born into through no fault of your own, and no one even asked you for your permission, but there you are. First and foremost, be on your own side. Life is a tough place. We all suffer aches and pains, disappointment and loss, and just generally get knocked around a little bit. Worse still, some of that pain is self-inflicted. You're going to make mistakes, make bad choices, even do bad things. No doubt, we all already have. You can hold yourself accountable while still being just supportive. Never stop rooting for yourself. Be nice to yourself. Be on your own side. Second suggestion, don't forget that you are a body. Rest, exercise, eat healthy food. These things are surprisingly important, and they have a spiritual impact. And finally, don't allow anyone to tell small stories about you. And don't you tell small stories about yourself either. But sometimes if we get trapped in a small story, it helps to draw our attention to a larger story. One of the reasons we sometimes go to church, because we tell large stories here. And there's a particular story that we tell at this church, the Universalist story that goes like this. The world right now needs healing. It needs change and it needs renewal. And there's a force of love that can affect that healing and that renewal. And this force of love is a force that we can access. It's a creative love, it's a healing love, It's a transformative love. And we can access it. All human beings can access it. We don't have to agree on where it comes from, and no doubt we all have different ideas about what it is, but it's there. That's the universalist story, and that story goes on to say that we can participate in that love, and we can take part in doing the work of that love that the world needs right now, just as we are, however imperfect. We don't need to fix ourselves, or heal ourselves, or prepare ourselves. We can just bring ourselves, our whole, messy, imperfect self, right up to the table, make ourselves a spot, and join in the work. Amen. Blessed be the name of the Son. Would you please rise and body your spirit for our closing hymn, number 108.